Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a seriously fascinating architectural mystery. How exactly did early, incredibly simple Indian earthen burial mounds evolve into the soaring wooden pagodas of East Asia? Think about those towering pagodas you might see in Japan, or the massive stone temples tucked away in the jungles of Indonesia. To the modern eye, they look entirely different, but if we trace their lineage all the way back, they actually started from a single, humble architectural seed. So let's dive right into this evolution. Here is our blueprint for today. We're going to start with the relic and the mound, deconstruct the anatomy of the stupa, look at early monasteries and prayer halls, witness the dramatic moment where the stupa becomes the pagoda, and wrap up with a living global architecture. Let's get to it. Section 1, the relic and the mound. To truly wrap our heads around these magnificent buildings, we've got to play detective and look at the very root of our architectural tree. We need to understand what they were actually built to protect in the first place, which is the physical relics of the Buddha. Let's trace this all the way back. Following the Buddha's passing around 483 BCE, his cremated remains were initially divided into just 8 portions. But the real game changer, the catalyst for a massive architectural explosion, happened a couple of centuries later, in the 3rd century BCE. Emperor Ashoka was eager to spread the teachings of Buddhism far and wide, so he unlocked these early mounds to redistribute the sacred relics into 84,000 new locations across his vast empire. Going from 8 resting places to 84,000? That forced the architecture to spread rapidly. They suddenly needed thousands of structures to safely house these tiny, sacred fragments, which jump-started an absolutely massive building campaign. To safeguard these divided ashes, early practitioners built what's known as the stupa. Now, initially, a stupa was literally just a dome-shaped earthen mound used as a relic shrine to house the sacred remains of the Buddha or other prominent monks. In these early days, it wasn't a building you could just walk into. It was more of a solid, sculptural mound of tightly packed dirt and clay. It was this massive, impenetrable object of veneration that dominated the flat, arid landscape, serving as a really powerful visual anchor for the faithful. What is absolutely fascinating about this is the human element. The presence of the relic fundamentally structured the flow of devotees and the architectural space itself. Since you couldn't go inside the solid mound to pray, the entire spatial organization was driven by the desire to venerate the relic from the outside. Practitioners would walk in continuous circular rounds around the mound. This practice is known as circumambulation. The architecture was specifically designed to guide this flowing circular movement of the pilgrims, an action that was meant to mirror the cosmic motion of the stars and planets around a central axis. Section 2, Anatomy of the Stupa. Let's visually deconstruct the early Indian stupa to see exactly how it works. Understanding its basic anatomy is absolutely crucial for grasping everything that comes later in our story. Looking at the core anatomy, it really breaks down into 3 vital components. First up, there's the anda, which is the large, smooth, hemispherical dome rising from the ground, symbolizing infinite space and the cosmos itself. On top of that sits the harmaka, a square, fence-like railing that essentially marks out the sacred domain of the gods from the earthly realm below. And most importantly, and you'll definitely want to remember this for later, rising out of that square railing is the chhatra. This is the central vertical axis bearing protective umbrellas. Think of the chhatra as a cosmic pillar, a structural pole directly connecting heaven and earth. To facilitate that vital meditative ritual of walking around the relic, the humble dirt mound eventually got a huge upgrade. Builders began encasing the dirt in solid brick or smooth stone to make it permanent. They added massive enclosing stone railings called avedika to separate the sacred path from the profane world outside. And at the 4 cardinal points, north, south, east, and west, they built incredibly ornate, soaring stone gateways called toronas. These gateways functioned as visual narratives. They were intricately carved with teachings, symbols, and stories to educate the pilgrims as they walked that circular processional pathway. Section 3. Monasteries and prayer halls. As Buddhism grew from a movement of wandering ascetics sleeping under trees into formalized, settled communities, the architecture had to adapt right along with it. They needed actual shelter for these daily religious activities and living spaces for the monks themselves. This evolution brings 2 brand new, highly organized spaces into existence. First, we see the development of viharas, which were residential quarters providing permanent cells for the monks to live, study, and meditate. Second, we get chaityas. These were awe-inspiring vaulted apsidal rock-cut halls. Apsidal basically just means they were semicircular at one end. These chaityas were built specifically to bring the stupa indoors. Imagine that sensory shift, stepping out of the harsh, blistering Indian sun and entering a cool, echoing, monumental hall carved directly into the heart of a mountain, where congregational prayer could happen right in front of a sheltered stupa, completely regardless of the weather. And as the religion spread outward across oceans and borders, the scale of this architecture just absolutely exploded. I mean, take the magnificent Borobudur, built in 9th century Indonesia. Here, that simple, early hemispherical stupa transformed into a massive, multi-tiered stone mandala. It's literally a cosmic diagram on an enormous scale, truly awe-inspiring. Pilgrims would physically climb upward through miles of incredibly detailed carved stone reliefs, with the physical journey upwards perfectly representing their own spiritual ascent through the stages of enlightenment. Section 4. Stupa becomes the pagoda. Now we reach a pivotal moment. As Buddhism spread further north and east from India into places like China, Korea, and Japan, we hit the evolutionary climax of our explainer. It begs a huge architectural question, right? How in the world did a hemispherical dirt mound become a multi-tiered wooden tower? What exactly caused a low, heavy stone dome originally built for the hot plains of India to suddenly stretch upwards into the soaring, instantly recognizable silhouette of the East Asian pagoda? It all comes down to climate and local materials. The early Indian stupa used heavy stone and brick to create a low dome, perfectly suited for an arid climate. But when master architects in East Asia adopted the religion and set out to build these sacred structures, they faced a completely different environment. We're talking heavy driving rains, intense humidity, and deep ancient forests with an absolute abundance of timber. To survive that wet weather using local timber beam construction, they desperately needed wide, overhanging roofs to shed the water away from the structure's core. So what did they do? They essentially grabbed that central axis, those chhatra umbrellas at the very top of the stupa we talked about earlier, and stretched them vertically, high into the sky. Those ancient umbrellas transformed into the multiple, highly ornamented roof tiers of the East Asian pagodas. It's a breathtaking example of form beautifully following environmental function. Section 5, a living global architecture. Because this evolutionary tree definitely didn't stop growing in the ancient world. It continued to adapt to completely new environments across the globe, bringing us right up to the modern era. A perfect example of this incredible adaptability? Hawaii. When Japanese immigrants arrived there to work, they didn't have their traditional tools, their master craftsmen, or their preferred building wood. So they brilliantly adapted yet again, bringing entirely new styles into existence. They converted ordinary wooden plantation houses into sacred temples. They adapted traditional and simplified Japanese designs using whatever was on hand. Later, they even built concrete structures that looked almost exactly like Western churches on the outside, so they'd blend seamlessly into the local community, all while perfectly maintaining the traditional Buddhist spatial organization and shrines on the inside. So across thousands of years, drastically different climates, new materials, and diverse cultures, the architecture's shape shifted over and over, from dirt mounds to stone mandalas, to towering wooden pagodas to concrete halls. But it always maintained its core DNA, protecting, centering, and venerating the sacred relic at its heart. As one of our sources perfectly summarizes the entire journey, the relic as the religious center of sacred space. Which brings us to a final thought for you to chew on. As you look at the buildings in your own community, consider how local weather, available materials, and evolving beliefs have quietly stretched and molded their designs over centuries. How does the environment shape the sacred, or even just the everyday spaces around you? Keep looking closely, because every single building has an evolutionary story to tell.